We are here today to celebrate a wonderful man who lived a truly wonderful life. I think I know pretty much everyone here, but I'm Elizabeth, and I am Jim's daughter. I also have up here my daughter, Heather, and I will introduce Mike in a little bit. So I just want to start by thanking everyone for being here, and thank you for being a part of my dad's great life. So I'd like to introduce Mike Collins. He's going to do the prayer for us, and Mike is my cousin Leanne's husband.
Okay. All right. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for Jim Holmes. We thank you for a life well lived, a life full of grace and compassion and an effervescence of joy that pervaded his whole life, his family, and even pervades his whole room right now as we talk and we celebrate his life. Just thank you, Lord, that we can come together and give him honor that he deserves as a family, as a community, and as friends. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And now, let's all sing a hymn commemorating the grace that filled my dad's amazing life. And the words are in the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So now we'd like to do some tributes, and we'll have Mom come up, and then I'll say a few words, Heather, and then any of you that would like to say some words, that would be wonderful.
Thank you all for coming. Jim was an everything good person. He modeled all the best qualities and achieving a lot in his life. He was completely self-made, completely, his whole life. He was quiet, gentle and kind, intelligent, honest, capable, unselfish, and trustworthy, and he had a lot of integrity. A friend once wrote me and said, that Jim was like Abe Lincoln with the subtle truth of Mark Twain. That's Kent over there. Anyway, one of Jim's favorite sayings was from Confucius, and it was, better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. In fact, he had a sign made, and my kids had it up in their area of the house their whole young life, that same saying. Let me fill you in on a few of the aspects of Jim's life. His grandfather, everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Too loud? His grandfather, Thorwald Nelson, left Norway when he was 17 as a sailor on a ship that went around the Horn of Africa on its way to the United States. And it was one of the many wrecks on the Horn. And his grandfather was the only survivor on the total ship. And he was rescued, he was washed up unconscious on the shore and rescued by one of the Dutch settlers there. He spent 2 or 3 years in South Africa, and then he realized his dream and came to the United States and married Jim's grandmother in Michigan. After she had 4 children, and I think mainly because she didn't want more, she decided to homestead, and she left Thorwald, and she homesteaded in Montana with the 4 children. And it was on forested land, full of trees, no house, nothing. It was a challenge, but she was a pretty gutsy woman, and she did well. There was one girl in the 4 children. Her name was Irene, and that was Jim's mother. And when she became an adult, she left Montana and came to Portland, and she met John Nelson, who was a construction worker, and they were married, and they went to Winnemucca, Nevada, where he was on a construction site, and Jim was born in Winnemucca. After a few years they came back to Portland, but John was seldom home, and Jim barely knew him. And when Jim was 8 years old, John left for good, and Irene was pregnant. And life was tough after that for Irene. For the next 4 years, the 3 of them, Jim and his baby brother and Irene, lived in one room. They moved often, and the 3 of them lived in one room. And often for dinner, they would have just bread and milk. But Jim remembers those years as being very happy because his mother was quite outstanding. Irene was an outstanding woman, as some of you people in this room know. Jim went to 8 different grade schools during his grade school life. And during that time, during the next 4 years after his father left, and a few years before that, and during that time, Jim started his athletic career, if you want to call it athletic. He became the ping pong champion of Portland at the time, and also marbles person in When he was 12 years old, Irene met a wonderful man at the North Hall. They were all in the Norwegian type, and they were married. And Jim considers him his real dad. And life became much better for Irene and the new husband. They got jobs in the shipyards, and they were making a little bit of money then. They could live better. And they lived in the Gresham area, and Jim went 4 years to Gresham High School, and he was a 4-year letterman, mostly in track. And when he was a senior, he won the pole vault championship for the whole state of Oregon, or not for the state of Oregon, but yeah, for the state of Oregon. And he won a 4-year scholarship to Oregon State, an athletic scholarship. And during that time, he was self-sufficient, got jobs, and mostly he was a dishwasher. Some of you know the city of Corvallis. He worked as a dishwasher on the side to make extra money. And at the electric lunch, any of you know the electric lunch? Let's see. I met Jim in ballroom dance class at Oregon State. And we dated a little bit, but Jim was a senior, and pretty soon he left and came to Portland and got a position teaching and coaching in Portland at Russellville School and Menlo Park grade schools. Later, after I graduated from Oregon State, we reconnected in Portland and got married, and both of us wanted to work overseas. So we made different applications, but Jim was accepted with the Department of Army, the 8th Army, and we decided to take that assignment, and we had 6 years overseas, 2 in Japan, 2 in Korea, and 2 in Germany. While Jim was in Japan, he pole vaulted in the Asian Games for the entire Pacific military. We were civilians, but we were employed by the military. And that was quite an experience. The Asian Games are the second largest games. They're second to the Olympics. So we had the teachers. He was a teacher in Japan, and then he got a teacher principalship in southern Japan his 2nd year, and his 3rd year, he was a full principal in Korea at a new school. The 8th Army was just changing from Japan to Korea, and dependents were just starting to be allowed, and Jim opened up a new school in Daegu, Korea. And in Germany, in Korea, Jim was quarterbacking for the Army. He left the pole, was quarterback. Then we went on to Germany, where Jim was a full principal at a pretty large school. He was still pretty young. And our daughter was born in Germany. Oh, our son was born in Korea. And he was born in the middle of a large coup, one of the biggest ones they ever had for Sigmund Rhee. It was in 1960. And he was born in a Quonset hut, and there was gunfire going off down outside. And I remember thinking at the time, this is kind of like MASH. Better, not quite that bad. Korea was very primitive at that time. After Germany, then we went to Germany, and while he was in Germany, he also opened up the Toastmasters Club. If some of you know Toastmasters group, and he opened up that for the whole of Germany. After Germany, we returned to the U.S. and Jim went to the University of Washington and got his PhD in educational administration and statistics. He wrote an extensive dissertation called Socio-Cybernetics, which I don't really understand, but the big book is out there on the table. After he got his PhD, he was hired by the Portland school system, and he remained there until he retired. And he was in charge of curriculum and testing. The first couple of years that he was with the Portland schools, he also taught at night school at Portland State, and he taught statistics and computer science there in the evening. In fact, one evening I went to him down to listen to his class, and he took me into the computer room. One computer took up the entire room. One computer. While he was with Portland schools, his life involved, he got involved in building houses, designing them and overseeing the building of houses, and also land development. And he developed the spot where we now live, and also was instrumental in building our house. It was quite an extensive project because he had to bring in the land in the city and get it zoned, and then it required all the stuff for a subdivision. Anyway, he built on 3 houses, and we had on our 7-lot subdivision. He was his whole life, heavily involved in track and field. And he was involved with the Portland Track Club his whole life, as well as Masters Track. In Masters Track, you go in at 30 and beyond in 5-year increments, and you compete with just people in your 5-year age group. So he was active into that up to like 80 years old. And he competed in pole vault, javelin, high jump, and hurdles. He was also a excellent swimmer and a beautiful diver and a gymnast. And he coached youth basketball teams for the park department. He volunteered for that. In his 50s and beyond, he took up roller skating. And he competed in both singles and partnered dancing in competition. Jim played many instruments: the piano, the organ, the trombone, saxophone, clarinet, ukulele, and guitar. And he was a gifted storyteller as well as a good cartoonist. He became Oregon's charge d'affaires just after he retired for Hutt River Prefecture, which is a province in Western Australia, about 150 miles north of Perth on the west coast. And we went down for his investiture, which was on the opposite side on the Gold Coast. It was a lavish ceremony, and there were representatives for Hutt River from all over Europe there in their robes and whatnot. It was quite the thing. And he got a couple titles. He was called a baron, got made a baron with the sword, the whole bit, and lordship. And when he got the lordship, that made me a lady. We had lots of times to travel after he took retirement, because he retired at 58. And then while he was with the schools, he had a 1-month vacation every year. And then during that time, he also took a whole year sabbatical. And we traveled a lot during that time. And we pretty much covered the whole world by plane, train, auto, and ships. We had 26 cruises, and 7 of those we taught ballroom dance lessons and went free on those 7. And that was kind of fun. We have passports from that time on as Merchant Marine. Jim belonged to the Lake Oswego Dance Club for about 30 years. And then when that ceased to be, we joined the Portland Heights Dance Club, and we were in that for about 25 years, and that's still ongoing. They meet at the Laurelhurst Club. He valued his many, many years with his morning coffee group. They met every morning in Lake Oswego and different coffee venues, and they numbered about 15 at that time. Now there's 2 left. But anyway, they met every day, and they had really good conversations, and that was a big part of his later life. He was always in good health and took no medications. He didn't drink or smoke, and I never heard him say one swear word. And he didn't raise his voice. I mean, he was really a good guy. Not that that's necessary to not drink or smoke. Trouble started when he fell down a flight of stairs. It was actually here at the University Club. It was that long flight that goes from the 2nd floor down, and he broke 4 vertebrae, and then later he broke another one when he went to the gym and tried to work out and broke a 5th one. And so his back, started to give way, and then, so he went and then he had a slight stroke shortly after that. And so then he went from cane to walker to wheelchair, and he had some speech difficulty after the stroke and some loss of his short-term memory. My son has lived with us for a few years now, he's very fit and able, and we really, really have valued him. And my daughter spent several months with us last year. Every day as he failed, his legs kept failing, and we had to have him in a wheelchair. And they suggested that he should be in bed, but we got him up every day, brought him out to his recliner, and he watched TV, and life was pleasant for him. And the miracle was he had no pain. He had no pain. And he was always very thankful and sweet to be around. His last 2 or 3 days, we showed him photos and held his hands, and he was in bed for the last 2 days. And his last evening, we put on his favorite movie, which was Maytime with Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald, and he enjoyed that. Jim had a fascinating, fulfilling, and accomplished life, and he will be remembered as a value educator, a prolific athlete, and a world traveler, and a man of many talents. But mostly he was a kind husband, father, and grandfather, and a devoted husband and father and grandfather. He was much appreciated and loved by me, and will be in my heart for always. I hope he has reunited with some of his good friends, his coffee buddies and others, and relatives, and his mother. So all I can say is thanks for the memories, Jim, until we meet again.
Wow, that's hard to follow. That's a very nice one. So I'm trying to repeat a couple things here, but well, thank you, Mom. And as you just explained, Dad had the most wonderful of lives. Starting in the Great Depression, he grew up very poor, but always talked about how happy his childhood was, and how wonderful his mom and his stepdad were. He had a full life of adventure, full of enjoyment. He used to talk a lot about his wonderful childhood, taking the streetcar to Portland, watching westerns at the old movie houses, playing all sports, and his home life being very pleasant due to his always smiling and good-natured mother, Irene. Mom already talked to you about his track career and ballroom dance and all that, so what I want to emphasize is how he was always available to us. A great role model, always positive, productive, happy. Love is spelled T-I-M-E, and Dad always spent a lot of time with us. He was the dad who actually played with all the neighbor kids, setting up baseball and other games. We had a high jump pit and a pole vault pit in our yard, and he coached us. He would teach us all to do handstands and cartwheels, not just us, but the neighbor kids too. And he helped us build go-karts, always present. He was always around the house doing chores, yard work, whatever. He was there for us, available to us. So again, love is spelled T-I-M-E, and he spent his time with us. He was very musically gifted, as my mom said, played every instrument. He taught me how to play some guitar and piano. We were always singing in the house and in the car, harmonizing the songs. He taught my brother how to play trumpet, and they would practice together. I can still hear them playing Sleepy Time Gal. That was, for some reason they played that a lot. A wonderful ballroom dancer, he also taught me the basic steps and instilled in me my love for big band music and ballroom dance. He was a great ballroom dance leader, as many of you know in here, and he never did more than his partner can handle. He always made you feel very comfortable and confident. I know he was a favorite dance partner for a lot of you in here. So Dad was an educator, always striving to learn. As my mom said, he was one of the first people to learn about computers for his job. He was kind of considered in the early 60s and late 60s, early 70s, he was the school district computer expert, and impressed everyone as one of the first to use computer-generated data for his presentations. And he continued to take computer classes, later in life. Dad was a man of ultimate integrity. I don't remember what I did wrong or what I lied about. One of my very first memories of him was sitting me up on the washing machine and told me that I would never get in trouble as long as I told the truth. And I never did. And that was ingrained in me from early on, and I've always held on to that value. Whenever Jimmy and I did something wrong, he would always just talk it over with us like adults. We never were punished, we never got in trouble, we always just talked things out. I have so many wonderful memories of Dad. We watched Saturday morning cartoons together. Every night we had dinner as a family. We spent most holidays together as a family and with our grandparents. When Mom sometimes worked evenings, we would go to the old movie theaters like the Roseway and watch old movies. We'd go roller skating at Oaks Park or at the Imperial, go out to eat at the Carnival or Eve's Buffet. Always something together, always something fun. Again, he made time for family. We took so many trips together as a family, and also just the two of us, and he visited me many times wherever I was stationed, in the Air Force or wherever I was living. We did so much together, skiing at Mount Hood, playing tennis, pole vaulting, and high jumping at the high school where he coached, riding horses, swimming, diving at Canita, water skiing on the lake. Time spent with Dad was always pleasant and always an adventure. I spent the last 6 months at home, and Jimmy and my mom were also there. My brother Jimmy has been there the last couple years, taking care of Dad with Mom, and I have so much appreciation for them both. I want to let everyone know that Dad's final years were peaceful, even up to the end. He miraculously was not in pain. I prayed every day that his end would be merciful, and it truly was. All of us there with him. I've read that in many cultures, our loved ones come back and are here and everywhere, and they're at their highest energy. Maybe in their late 20s, early 30s. That's how I like to think of Dad now. Enthusiastic, young, healthy, existing to the fullest. Happy to be back at his peak and going on to new adventures with all his loved ones. We'll meet him again one day, and until then, let's celebrate him, a life that could not have been better, a life well lived, a blessed life, a life that is an example to us all. So please celebrate today and remember my dad for the great man that he was.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? How about now? Is this okay? Nice informal feeling. So I'm kind of nervous to be up here today because I think pretty much everybody in this room knew my grandfather for a couple decades longer than I did. So I don't feel like there's a lot I can tell you that you don't already know, but I can just give you a little glimpse of what it was like to be his granddaughter. And a memory that sticks out in my mind, it wasn't a big event or anything, but one day Papa gave me this little nicely wrapped box, and I opened it up, and inside of it was the key to the universe. Yeah, it was a key, and he had written "key to the universe" on it, and he said, "This can open any door," and I just always kind of think of that when encapsulating his, I don't know, what the lessons that he imparted on me, which was the key to the universe, which is cherishing adventure, always exploring, always growing, valuing education. So what I really got from him was just his love of learning languages and his love of learning new instruments. And what I hope we all take away from this event was just how much of Papa and his spirit we can try to embody ourselves. I am 26, and for my whole life and for the rest of my life, I just hope to be as much like Papa as I can and to really live a life that he would have approved of, which is a life of adventure and exploration and fun and just trying out every new thing you possibly can just for the fun of it. And I really owe his influence on me to me having gotten into medical school recently. And I think no matter what path I would have chosen, he would have just supported me unconditionally with all the love in the world. But I wish I could have told him that I don't know, it's hard for me to know what to say about him because he is the whole reason that I'm alive, and he's the whole foundation of our family and all the unconditional love of our family. So I think I already said this, but everybody just leave this room and try to have a big life of adventures and never stop trying new things, and try to exercise when you can. And one last thing is that my mom married into a family of 3 other kids. They couldn't be here today, but they all went on to have 5 kids, and I've worked with a lot of kids, and I just want to say, even beyond the people in this room, Papa's influence has reached a lot of people over the years. He's just created this culture of love and education and patience, and I just try to embody that with every kid that I work with and every person I see, and he is directly responsible for how good of an aunt I've tried to be to those 5 kids and my siblings. Just his influence spreads out in waves beyond us, like to all people we've never met, just the world around us. So thank you everyone for being here, and I don't know, he was the best grandfather that anyone could possibly have, and I'm so grateful for him, and everyone in my life is grateful for him because they've met him through me and through us. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody.
And no, John, would you like to come up?
Good afternoon. Is loud enough for everybody? Hi, my name is John Ferenz. My wife Veronica is sitting in the back, and I'd like to begin by telling you that we know exactly when we met Jim and Kathleen, which is very easy. It was our first dance at Portland Heights back in December of 2001. That was a long time ago, Kathleen. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel sort of overwhelmed when I heard of all the accomplishments of Jim. Someday I may have a celebration of life, and I sure hope they have enough to say about me. I'm gonna have to go back and get a lot accomplished really quickly. Okay, so I'm sorry, where was I? Tom Holman, I should have flipped the coin for you, and you could have been up here. Okay. Anyway, also, the other thought that I kept thinking about when I was listening to everybody is, oh my gosh, I see a Amazon Prime or Netflix miniseries here. And you accomplished that much. It was amazing. I would like to tell you about the 4 aspects of Jim that we remember the most, I think. And the first one would be the Jim the dancer. And we met Jim at the very first dance. We met Jim and Kathleen, and we also met a bunch of really great people. A lot of them are here in this very room. Really a great bunch of people in Portland Heights Dance Club. And we're proud to say we're still members. And really, we've met people that have been friends for many, many years, and we really cherish them. Anyway, it was our first dance. We didn't know that much about dancing. And Jim somehow noticed that. He noticed that we were sort of in the middle of the dance floor, just sort of shuffling around, and he came over and he offered to teach us a couple of steps. And what he taught us was a very simple foxtrot. And that was it. He took us aside and showed us a couple of steps. And that's the dance that we did for the rest of the evening. And we felt pretty darn hot, I'll tell you, doing that. The only time that I think Jim got embarrassed was when we tried to do that slow dance while they were doing a fast dance out on the dance floor, and you don't do that. So anyway, that was Jim the dancer, and I didn't realize how obviously they taught classes on cruises, and they competed, and we saw many pictures of them when we visited their home of them dancing, and I thought, oh, these are pros. We have to be careful with these people. Well, that was Jim. That was Jim the dancer. The next one they mentioned is Jim the movie lover. A lot of times we would be invited to come over to their home, and my wife and I love movies also, so we would get together and we would watch some of the classic movies with them and discuss them and all that, and it was just really a lot of fun. And that was great days over there watching what, and as you heard, Jim was watching movies up until the very end. Movies, he's probably still watching them now. We're waiting for Kathleen to enjoy them with him someday. That was Jim the movie lover. And the other person I remember is Jim the athlete. And I only remember him as Jim the runner, and only later when I saw pictures that I realized he was a pole vaulter and a swimmer, and I didn't realize about all the track and field. That was amazing. But there is something that Jim mentioned to me once, and I thought this was a really fascinating piece of trivia about them. He said, I swam in both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans on the same day. Now, I've asked his family about them, and they don't really remember this particular trip, but somehow they must have been coming back from a trip. They were on one of the coasts, and before he left, he went for a swim in the ocean. They must have been somewhere near the ocean. And after he landed on the other side of the country, guess what? He went into the other ocean and took a swim. So he actually did swim in both oceans the same day. What else can we say about Jim? Well, anyway, the big thing is this is a celebration of life of Jim, and I think we're all amazed at how many different facets of his life and how much he accomplished in his life. And it was really a life well lived, and that's what you can call it. But besides Jim, the other people I would certainly like to mention is his family. Kathleen and his daughter and his son, who took care of him for those many months, and I'm sure made this journey that we're all going to be taking someday just made it so much easier for him. So thank you, Kathleen, Elizabeth, Jimmy, for everything you did to him. I'm sure you didn't think it was great at the time, but it was a great thing. I'm sure all of us think someday, and we'll all get there someday. Someday we all have family or friends that will treat us as well. So, anyway, thank you so much for letting me say a few words. We will definitely miss Jim. We're still doing the foxtrot that he taught us. We learned a few other dances. I'm sure he'd be proud of us. I'm sure later that evening he probably apologized to people saying, I didn't teach them to do that while they're doing the fast dance. But he was really great, and we will remember him, and we will cherish his memory. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to say a few words?
I have one more thing I wanted to say. Not that I didn't talk too long, but one more thing that is really interesting. I told you about his grandfather that washed up in the shore of South Africa. Well, Jim and his cousin took a trip to South Africa later in his, well, I'm not sure when it was, but anyway, they went to South Africa. He got transported out at the same spot that his ship was wrecked, and he swam to shore, and the newspaper in the city, Elizabethtown, did a big article on him with his picture and a feature article on how he reenacted this rescue. So that was kind of fun, that he went to Africa and swam ashore there. That's all.
else would like to say anything? Well, please, oh, yeah, Brent.
I'll say something real quick.
Okay, great.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Brent Barron, and I met Jim probably 52 years ago when my family moved from Selwood, Oregon to Westland, Oregon, and realized that Jim and his brother were developing some property across the street from our new home. And I think Jim came up to the house to introduce himself to my parents and said, if your son is interested in doing some construction cleanup and working, I would be happy to have him work for me. And of course, what teenager doesn't need a little extra gas money? And so that led into doing that for a while, going to high school, and then on weekends going over to their Wimberley Street property to do some other work for Jim so he could spend time with his family. I helped spread some bark dust and split and stack firewood so he could spend time with Elizabeth and Jimmy. But we all became friends, and I consider them family. Many years went by where I didn't do any work at their rentals, at their rental property or their residential property. For one reason or another, I got married in the Navy. We had a young son, and that kept us busy. But it didn't matter. It could be years before I got a call that they needed help with something. And it was just like where we picked up where we left off with a deep friendship. And I too was amazed about how humble he was, generous, kind, and I had no idea he had accomplished all the athletic and educational accomplishments he had done until I learned to, today, talking to people and seeing how what a wonderful, intelligent, kind human being he was, and of course, very generous too. And I'll remember that, how kind and patient he was. I told him he said, Jim, I don't know how to do that or fix that. He said, well, just give it a try and we'll see what happens. Thank you very much.
He does carpentry, electrical, you name it, he can do it.
Oh, you're too kind.
You're right.
Would anyone else like to say anything? Would anyone else like to say anything?
It doesn't have to be a big speech. It could just be one sentence.
I could lead the way on that.
Yeah.
So I'm Leanne, I'm a niece, I'm his little brother's, one of his little brother's children. And Jim would always go out of his way to talk to us, or to call and get together periodically, every once in a while. And he would always want to talk about what I might not know about my dad, and what I might not remember about my grandma, and give me history. And he did not ever talk about himself, but he was a peacemaker in the family, and I think he really tried to make connections. And he's handing me pictures of my dad because he's like, your dad doesn't want these, but you should have them. It's just really cute and sweet.
Anyone else, it can be short.
Here we go. Okay. Thank you very much. Give me this opportunity. Yeah, like this. Wow. It's wonderful to be with Kathleen. Jim and Kathleen, I can say, were the funnest couple that we have ever known. I mean, we've had dear friends and old friends and college friends, but they were fun just to be with. And Kathleen always made both Barbara and I feel so good. When you're with Jim, there was a certain calm about him. And I like to talk, but he would listen, and just at the right time, he'd say something very profound. He'd listen. And you know, you felt smarter when you were talking to Jim. Yeah, I left the room all puffed up. I was going to run for Congress. You know? A wonderful, wonderful man. In our lives, you meet certain people. Of course, Kathleen is a media. I remember the first time I saw Kathleen 55 years ago, and we lived across the street on Wembley Park Road in Lake Oswego. And after a busy day at the bank, I got out in my three-piece suit and looked across the street, and this gorgeous brunette comes across. I think they delivered a letter to their house. It was ours. And she says, "Hello, you know, I'm Kathleen Holmes." I thought, wow, you know, I had no idea movie stars lived in this neighborhood. I lived in Lake Oswego, but this is really something. I remember, of course, they traveled all over the world. And I love to talk about Korea. I learned all about pots. You saw the pots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
It's just a small thing, but it meant a lot to me. Yeah.
Heather has them on display at her house in Downingtown.
Good. And Jim and Kathleen would have them over for dinner, and we'd have dinner at their house. And since they traveled all over the world, they'd been many wonderful places and had a lot of really good food. And so we were going to do something special. And so we decided to do Trader Vic's Susu curry with samballs, whatever those are. Those are condiments. And so we made the curry, and they came over, and we had cocktails. And it was really wonderful. And Jim was telling some stories, and we were all telling stories. And then he was quiet for a moment. And he puts his fork down, and he looks across the table and says, "This has got to be the tastiest meal I have ever eaten." I know, now there's a man who knows how to, you know, give a compliment. Now, he always told the truth. It wasn't the best meal, but it was the tastiest. So I gave him a little room. We love Jim and Kathleen, and Kathleen's such a wonderful friend. Someday we'll all see Jim again. And thank you for having me up here. I know you all know a lot about him, so do we. Thank God for him. What a blessing to have him for a friend.
Do you have to go up there? Or
No, you can get it. It's fine.
Okay, I'll step back here. Well, I was just, what a marvelous collection of Jim. And first I want to thank you, Kathleen and Elizabeth and Jimmy, and putting it together and kind of filling in the blanks of Jim's life that a lot of us didn't really get to know him back then. But I want to go from the point when most or quite a few of us here met Jim and Kathleen. It was through the Portland Heights Dance Club. And, you know, we were quite a family. There was a group of us that just connected, and we always thought, if you dance, you're going to be a happy person. And they all were, and we were very fortunate to have met so many wonderful people through that group, that club. But I think of Jim, Kathleen, first of all, we kind of, from the time we met them, we sort of heard about Elizabeth and Jimmy, and of course Heather as a little toddler. I remember you were down here, a little thing. So it's fun for us to have this ability to bring all those memories together. But I think of Jim during the time we met him as a participator. Remember all the gatherings we would have within our group from Portland Heights Dance Club? I mean, we would have all kinds of functions, events where we would dress up, do Oscar nights, do a Halloween costume, do just a wine tasting out on the front porch, if you remember. And Jim was always just so there. And he was a participator. You know, he enjoyed connecting with people. And I think that's what made him so special. Thank you.
Thank you.
imagine this room all decorated and the lights and the ball gowns and the beauty and the feeling of the music. And Jim was the first one, other than my husband, that I danced with at that club. And this was early on in my dancing career, so he helped me quite a bit along the road. And at one point, I stepped on his foot so badly that he did have to stop. And you're right, he did not utter a single bad word. I just cherish him asking me to dance at that place, and including me in that group. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Marilyn, do you think you should tell your story about Jim? Do you want me to
Do
tell
you
it?
think so?
Yeah, I think you should. I think it's okay. I think it's okay now. I think it's okay.
Well, like so many in the room, my husband and I joined Portland Heights, and here is this tall.
Oh, Marilyn, come up here.
Oh, okay. So, my husband and I joined Portland Heights, and like so many in the room, we were, really didn't know that many folks. But here is this tall, distinguished-looking gentleman whose name tag, which we all wore in the very large print so we all could see, Jim Holmes. And I said, Jim Holmes? I think I know a Jim Holmes, really. Yes, I said, he was my 7th and 8th grade PE teacher. Really? What school was that? Menlo Park, I said. Oh, that would be me then. So I said, well, hello, Mr. Holmes, and nice to see you again. And he got very serious and he said, now you're not going to tell anybody I was your PE teacher. I think he was thinking about his age. But as gracious as he always was to everybody, there is still a little part that said, I don't want to look older than everybody else.
I don't think I need to go up there, but I think it's interesting. Jim was a teacher, and I think he gave us the greatest lesson today through friends and family. Nobody's going to leave here today without looking at their own life through the prism of Jim Holmes. And it's not what you accomplished in life, it's what you gave. And about time, the small moments, having a kid help out, being kind to people, that's his legacy. And it's a sobering moment today. His last great gift in my life is to remind me what matters. And it's the people that you touched. And I knew Jim, but I didn't know him the way I did after today. What a great and complex man.
That's true. Very true. Very true.
I think that's a wonderful closing statement, so thank you very much for that. So let's all eat more and have another drink, and let's do some socializing and let's celebrate the life of Jim Holmes.